Hello and welcome to Ethereum Classic Community Calls. ETC Community Calls is a weekly voice chat that happens on the Ethereum Classic Discord server every Tuesday, usually at 1500 hours UTC. The content of these calls is decided by the ETC community. If you'd like to contribute, you can join us on Discord at ethereumclassic.org/discord, and you'll find us in the Community Calls channel. If you'd like to help spread the good word of Classic, make sure you comment on this video, like it, subscribe, share, and hit the notification bell. Thanks to all involved in contributing to ETC. Okay, so thanks for joining us for Ethereum Classic Community Call number 16 on the 8th of March 2022. This week we have a bit of a different thing. We're going to take a break from the usual SHA-3 discussion and focus on the reason that we're all here, and that is the Ethereum Classic principles and philosophy. And this week we're joined by guest Donald McIntyre, who needs no introduction, but for the listeners that are new to this show, maybe Donald, you could say hello, give us a bit of an introduction, and thanks for joining us, by the way.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me to talk about principles and philosophy of Ethereum Classic. I'm Donald McIntyre, founder of Etherplan. And before I was an entrepreneur in the fintech industry. And before that, I was private banker or financial consultant at Wall Street firms in the 90s. And now I work at a data science firm, and I dedicate many hours per day volunteering for Ethereum Classic as well.
That's great, and we all appreciate your hard work and output. You're a real workhorse in terms of providing content and thoughtful discussion in the Ethereum Classic community, so thanks for that.
Thank you.
And I believe today you have prepared a little presentation
Yes.
that we will be following along, and this will be recorded if you're listening on YouTube, and you should be able to see the video. So I think Donald's going to share his screen now, and he will begin his presentation.
At more or less in 50 minutes, I have to leave for another meeting. So I prepared a presentation that I'm going to go over very quickly, and then we can open it for questions. You also had an outline with some questions. So shall we do that?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. So you guys should be able to see my screen, no?
Yes, I got you.
Very good. Okay, so this presentation is about Ethereum Classic principles and philosophy. And I'm the founder of Etherplan, and what I said before. What I wanted to talk about is the distinction between philosophy and principles first. So philosophy is the study of fundamental questions such as about existence, reason, logic, knowledge, values, mind, behavior, aesthetics, and virtue in general, no? It's more or less like a science. Before 2,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, any kind of study was called philosophy. Now many branches have separated like specific disciplines like physics, chemistry, biology, history, politics, etc. Those things have like turn into their specific philosophies, and they're called sciences. But philosophy is more or less like the observation and questioning about reality and stuff like that. And then principles are basically like propositions, lists of propositions and values that are guides for behavior. So philosophy is like thinking about reality, and principles are like conclusions. Okay, I should do this. And usually principles are short lists or very focused and condensated concepts. So they're easier to follow on a daily basis and have them in your mind. What comes to mind, for example, is the 10 Commandments. No? After many years, Moses of guiding his community to the promised land. He came up, he went to the mount, talked to God, and he received the commandments, and they were 10 and very easy to follow and easy to understand. No? Okay, so in terms of Ethereum Classic in particular, the philosophy, the thinking of how these technologies should work and evolve started many years ago in the late 70s and 80s with the cypherpunks. They were the persons that not only started to think about these things, but also build the concrete technologies that are key parts of Bitcoin and Ethereum Classic today. And their main goals, their way of thinking was that the internet was going to provide this freedom for people to communicate and interact, but at the same time also for bad things like surveillance and control, political control and stuff like that. So they wanted to build tools to guarantee their privacy so they could interact inside this world that they would create inside the internet with privacy, hard money, so they could even do commerce and stuff like that, smart contracts, so they could have like these automated agents that would provide some services without depending on corporations and governments and stuff like that. And their overarching goal was trust minimization. The cypherpunk from there, the cypherpunk who wrote most and put all these ways of thinking and philosophies in writing in black and white was Nick Szabo. And I always recommend 4 of his essays, no, that contain a lot of the information that we use today to think about how to behave and how to manage these systems and to think about principles as well. One is BitGold, that explains that is basically the connection, the original connection between gold or scarcity in the real world, in the physical world, and gold or scarcity in the digital world. That's why he called it BitGold. And when you read his blog post, etc., about the blog post about BitGold, there's a lot of information there about philosophy. Trusted third parties are security holes. This is basically the essay where he explains why trust minimization is important, no? Because of the biases when you deposit trust in third parties, that trust tends to be abused. And also when building systems, engineers and computer scientists tend to always put some centralized point in their systems, either because they're lazy or because it's too much work to actually decentralize all the parts, or because they just couldn't invent the systems to create this decentralization. Then he wrote Shelling Out: The Origins of Money, that explains all the fundamentals about money. For me, is the definitive explanation of what is money. I think this essay alone should earn a Nobel Prize in economics, in my opinion. And then he wrote much later in 2017, the previous things he wrote them between in the 90s and early 2000s. And then in 2017, he wrote Money, Blockchains, and Social Scalability, that it was after the invention of Bitcoin and everybody was talking about the blockchain, etc. So he made the distinction of why proof of work is not scalable computationally, but that must be the cost, so it is scalable socially. Scalable social scalability means that anybody in the world can access this technology without any restrictions. That is full scalability in terms of the social layer. But to be able to accomplish this and really reduce the trusted third parties and the risk of trusted third parties, it was entirely necessary to make it computationally unscalable. No, so I recommend people to Google these and to read them. It's part of the philosophy, it's part of the research, it's part of the thinking about these things. And Nick Szabo really put them all on in black and white in his essays. From there, there's a set of essays also, or papers or documents, that are specific to Ethereum Classic. So Ethereum Classic, the history of cypherpunks and everything that Nick Szabo wrote and all other cypherpunks as well is the history of Ethereum Classic. Ethereum Classic, in my opinion, is a cypherpunk product. It's a cypherpunk philosophy outcome or result. When there was the crisis of the DAO, that Ethereum and Ethereum Classic split in 2016, the people who decided, the heroes, in my opinion, who decided to preserve the original chain, which is Ethereum Classic and Immutable, felt the need to write their reasons why they did this. So they wrote 4 documents that I think are the foundational documents, and later there was another document that I'm going to mention now. The first one was the Declaration of Independence, which is similar to the Declaration of the Independence of the United States in 1776. It's a list of grievances, and it also talks about philosophy and principles. Then a Crypto Decentralist Manifesto talks about the attitude and the way of thinking and the worldview of decentralization of these systems. And then Code is Law and the Quest for Justice is an explanation to the concept of what does code is law means, no? Because many people was thinking that it was the real law, but here it clarifies that code is law is inside the blockchain. It's just a metaphor for physical law, for example, that you cannot change. And then Istora wrote, who's the host of this call, he wrote, let's keep Ethereum classic. I think that he introduced many concepts and mapped all this philosophy and things that were written before to the current situation of Ethereum Classic. And I think it is a classic and a foundational document. And one of the most important concepts that he wrote here is that the protocol design, software coding, and the operation of the blockchain and future changes are downstream of philosophy and principles. This means that we have a philosophy, a worldview. We have a list of principles to behave on a daily basis, and then after that we can think about design and construction of the system and how it operates. I think that is a brilliant concept, and I think that from all these things you can like condensate or create a set of very easy to think principles to guide our behavior on a daily basis and for the future and for future changes and stuff like that, and to distinguish what is good, what is bad, what is functional with the philosophy, and what is not functional with the philosophy. So I wrote in 2017 or 18, I don't remember. It's a set of principles. And I just wanted to mimic the commandments, because I guess that it's easy for people to remember 10 things. So I wrote trust minimization, immutability, fungibility, finality, censorship resistance, permissionlessness, auditability, reconcilability, least authority, and backward compatibility. So I wrote about this, and I did a few videos, and I'm going to just go over them very fast. Trust minimization means to reduce the reliance on trusted third parties for entering, processing, and finalizing transactions and smart contracts. Trusted third parties are security holes because they hold our money and wealth, they hold our personal data, manage everything on centralized servers, they can be hacked, and they tend to abuse their position. Traditional trusted third parties are, amongst others, banks, credit card companies, tech companies, certification authorities, corporations, and governments. Blockchains have trusted third parties as well. This is very important to understand. Developers, miners, validators, node operators, and all kinds of participants as stakeholders. For example, as a volunteer, I am a little bit of a trusted third party because I give opinion and I try to influence the direction of future changes, for example. Investors are also a little bit of trusted third parties because depending on their size, they can also influence the community or the future operation of the network a little bit. The thing is that this is incredibly minimized. The influence even of a miner or a developer or node operator, it's incredibly minimized because of how the blockchain is replicated and decentralized. So I write here, however, blockchains are trust minimized because they have no central authority. Data is distributed among many nodes globally. Cryptographic components protect property and agreements. The consensus mechanism prevents tampering. The coordination problem to put everybody together to do a controversial change, for example, prevents community collusion. And in any case, ultimately, communities can split if they don't like what's going on, which is what happened between Ethereum and Ethereum Classic. Now, Ethereum is a fork of the original chain, and Ethereum Classic is the original chain. So what problems does trust minimization solve? It minimizes central control and authority of blockchain networks, significantly reduces vulnerability to single points of failure, reduces trusted third-party costs, reduces trusted third-party restrictions, and expands access to larger populations worldwide. This is the social scalability concept. Immutability means accounts, balances, and smart contracts cannot be modified except by holders of corresponding private keys by entering transactions according to protocol rules. This is important. The blockchain pushes responsibility to the individual. If you have the secret key or the private key, you have control. If you don't have it, you do not have control. Immutability is really about the integrity of property and agreements. Property and agreements are represented by accounts, balances, and smart contracts, or these decentralized programs, no? Which can have the rules of agreements between people and businesses. The phrase corresponding private keys means that there should not be any alternative way of modifying accounts, balances, and smart contracts. That includes, but is not limited to, hard forks, changes of state, ad hoc transactions, backdoors, or third-party account freezing. So when there's an account, when there's property, when there's a smart contract, when there's a DAO, whatever's inside the blockchain, only people with the private keys can participate and modify the states of those objects, not the community or any other third party. That's the essence of immutability. Fungibility, the native tokens must all be the same and interchangeable globally. Establishing the native token as a generally accepted medium of exchange significantly helps the underlying economics of the blockchain. It is an important component of the price system due to its common acceptance, ability to communicate price information, ease of use, and reduce mental cost. The fungibility of the native token is very important, and the fact that it's native is also very important. The native token, like ETC in the Ethereum Classic blockchain, is the one that is issued to pay for proof of work of the miners, and then is the one that is used to pay for fees for transactions to be included. So it has a key economic function and has intrinsic value just because it's used for those things. Then it can get intrinsic value just by being used for many other things externally, no? But that's the core inside the blockchain. Finality means that transactions and executed smart contract code cannot be reversed once entered, processed, and finalized according to protocol rules. Irreversibility creates certainty and helps the free and continuous circulation of capital globally. This is a key economic concept that is also helped by fungibility. The flow of capital. When you have a currency system that when there is a transaction and is used for payment, and the economic agents know that that is final, then they can get on with their lives and continue the chain of activities of life, no? And that includes economic transactions. So the fluidity and flow of economics is digamos, benefited by finality. It's not only a security thing. It's a thing about continuity of human activity, human action. When a censorship resistance, as long as they are compliant with protocol rules, transactions, smart contract cannot be prevented from being entered, processed, and finalized. Censorship resistance is about what happens inside the blockchain. No? Transactions, as long as they're correctly formed, and smart contracts, they should be accepted, processed, executed, and nothing should stop that. Permissionlessness, as long as they are compliant with protocol rules, anyone from any place in the world can create accounts, enter transactions and smart contracts, and participate in the network as a competent developer, miner, validator, node operator, user, or any other prescribed participant or stakeholder. This is very similar to censorship resistant, but it's about not stopping people. Permissionlessness is similar to censorship, but it's not about stopping transactions and activity inside the blockchain. It's more something in the social layer, not stopping people from participating. For example, the other day, MetaMask, when they restricted access to Ethereum by Venezuelan users, that's a gross, open, horrible violation of permissionlessness. Auditability. Auditability. Transaction and smart contract history must be analyzable and reconcilable by anyone or by holders of corresponding private keys. This is a key also. Auditability is about the availability of information for verification purposes. So one of the great things about blockchains is that they are transparent and anybody can go and audit Bitcoin and Ethereum Classic and check whether the supply is correct. You can check smart contract code, verify that it doesn't have backdoors or bugs or stuff like that. You can see accounts when you send a transaction. You can immediately go and see whether the transaction is accepted. That's exactly opposite of banking systems. Banking systems are black boxes, and we don't know whether banks are good or broke. We don't know if many things. The transactions can take days to process, especially international transactions. So this availability of information is key. Reconcilability, transaction smart contract history must match mathematically to the latest and all future states according to protocol rules. This is in response a little bit to the DAO hard fork. There was an argument at the time that even though the hacker had 3.6 million Ether, and then suddenly in block 1,120,001 he had 0, it didn't mean it was a violation of immutability because it was a change forward of the state, but it did not violate the past history of transactions. So it was a total fallacy. So reconcilability means that everything to the past and to the future must match mathematically to the transactions being entered into the network according to protocol rules, not manual changes of state. It also invalidates another argument that says that, for example, when this was a change entered when Entirety lost control of a multi-sig wallet in 2017 with, I don't know, now it must be worth $1 billion or something like that. And they said, okay, we lost control because there was a bug and for some reason now we cannot send transactions to it, but I can prove to the community that I have the private keys. So the community should do a manual modification of the state of the chain again and return my money. Well, that is not acceptable. The only way for transactions to be processed is if they are entered into the blockchain and they're formed correctly, not manually, even if you have proof of property outside of the blockchain. Least authority, developers, miners, validators, node operators, users, and all other prescribed participants and stakeholders must limit their participation. This is a purely social thing. Practicing only the functions of their roles in accordance with protocol rules and these common principles. This is just a principle that we have to adjust to what is the idea of decentralized idea of Ethereum Classic, and that when we do from doing proposals to our activities in the community to running nodes or mining, it has to be according to the philosophy, and the protocol rules. Um, to ensure social scalability, blockchain communities need to focus on network functionality, fixing bugs, enhancing security, and new features. All legal, ethical, or moral considerations need to be set aside and resolved off blockchain between the private parties. Yeah, they have to limit their behavior to that. Then there's something special here, which is the permissionless fallacy. Because the blockchain, Ethereum Classic is permissionless, that does not mean anything may be done. Indeed, anything that does not follow blockchain principles must be rejected. So that's an important thing, because the fact that it's permissionless and we want to be open and anybody in the world can participate, that does not mean that you can participate and do whatever you want and change and introduce a change or something that goes against the whole idea of Ethereum Classic. So it's absolutely legitimate to reject those things. And things like toxicity and stuff like that come, and I think that that's absolutely natural, especially in decentralized systems. And the last one is backward compatibility. Accounts, balances, and smart contracts must be able to be managed and executed and work as originally formed and designed forever. When implementing fixes, changes, future upgrades to the network, the functionality and execution of past accounts and smart contract code inside the blockchain must not break and work as originally designed through time for eternity. This is a very important principle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Donald. That's awesome presentation, and I hope the audience can learn some of the, I guess, the rationale for why Ethereum Classic is what it is and where it came from that. And I guess it all stems from this original incident of the DAO, and that really was the sort of defining moment that not just created Ethereum Classic, but also sort of separated out the ideas that made Classic, and filtered out the participants in the Ethereum ecosystem that were not on board with those principles.
Yeah, and I think that what you said is interesting, because there's this like quasi-theological interpretation of the existence of ETC and what caused its origin. One digamos, way of describing it can be, okay, there was the DAO, the community did the reversal, and that's when Ethereum Classic was origin, and that was the cause of the existence of Ethereum Classic. I say that that's not the event that produced Ethereum Classic. For me, the founder of Ethereum Classic is Vitalik. He thought about it in 2013. He did all the steps and everything to get money and get a team to build it in 2014. And it was launched in 2015, and that's Ethereum Classic. The event of 2016 created Ethereum, in my opinion. But again, it's more or less like discussing the Trinity in Christianity. It's a never-ending question.
I think it's a good way of putting it, and I think a lot of people would agree. And on reflection, you're probably right, but I guess a lot of the original people that were involved in creating Ethereum were not aware of that themselves, or at least they didn't buy into it as much as they should have, I guess.
No, they're totally convinced that they are the original chain and the Ethereum community and all that.
Yeah, I guess the unfortunate thing was that they convinced, or they pretended that code is law was the thing they were following, and it turned out they weren't. That was just a convenient marketing gimmick, apparently.
It was a giant bait and switch.
Indeed. But nonetheless, Ethereum Classic was created, so we've got to give them props for that. And in a way, I think it's probably the best way that it could have happened, because this kind of leads into another sort of topic, which is the sort of immaculate conception that Ethereum Classic is, in that there is no leader, there is no Satoshi. I mean, if Vitalik did not do the hard fork, then Ethereum would still be one chain and it would still have a foundation and it would still be somewhat centralized by that foundation. So the split itself made Ethereum Classic even more decentralized.
Yes, I think that it was a big community, and evidently it was mixed in terms of philosophy, and definitely the separation made Ethereum Classic community in that sense more focused on its principles and more pure, no? Because all the people that were in a way imposters, or they didn't know really what they were doing, they went with Ethereum, and today Ethereum is a totally subjectively managed chain, whereas Ethereum Classic is, I would say, together with Bitcoin, maybe one of the most pure original cypherpunk projects in the industry.
I agree with that for sure. And it's one of the few that has like explicitly pitched itself as that. Like there's not many blockchains that even really care about decentralization that much. It's more of just an annoying thing than the end goal.
Yeah, that's also very interesting because everybody is going in one direction. When you see the whole industry and the noise, and try to separate signal from noise, try to figure out what's going on. I mean, there's like 20 proof of stake smart contracts blockchains. No, you have Ethereum is still Ethereum 1, but to try to win the race to go to proof of stake and be more scalable, it was EOS, Tezos, Polkadot, ICP, Solana, AVAX. I don't know. There's Neo, Tron. There's so many, and it's like incredible because the great majority of people are going in that direction of scalability and innovation, and we need to. I mean, we need to focus on innovation. This depends on innovation and scalability, and the only project that I see that is going in exactly the opposite direction and saying, no, we are going to sacrifice scalability and we're going to stay, and our focus is going to be security and immutability, is Ethereum Classic. And I would say, of course, Bitcoin as well, but in the sector of smart contract blockchains, yes, Ethereum Classic is totally going in the other direction. Even other proof of work contract blockchains like Cadena, they talk about sharding and fragmentation and scalability all the time. So even if they are staying with proof of work, it's more or less like a excuse to make believe that they are following Nakamoto consensus or something like that, but they're totally focused on like the others in scalability and sacrificing security for that.
Right. I think there's a huge sort of misdirection going here in the industry where people don't really understand why blockchains exist in the first place and what problem they're there to solve. And I guess this kind of leads into the next sort of question of like, what is it exactly that Ethereum Classic and Bitcoin and all the properly decentralized blockchains, what is the point of them? What are they actually trying to achieve in the grand scheme of things, do you think?
But one of the questions that I saw for this call was, what is decentralization? No? So before answering the questions of what do they solve, I think that decentralization was very well described by Nick Szabo in that essay that I pointed out, trusted third party or security holes. So a centralized system is basically you have many components. For example, a nation has from the top down, you have the federal central government, and then you can have provinces or states, and within each province or state you have municipalities. And the three levels all depend, though they are governed by the level above. No, municipalities have to comply with state or provincial laws and rules, and then provinces and states, they have to comply with federal um, rules and laws. And those systems, not only they may start in theory in a certain way with balance of power and checks and balances, stuff like that, but unavoidably or inexorably they tend to centralization. No? We have humans, we have a natural bias to follow something above or a leading point, focal point. And the federal government and all these organizations, or the national government, tends to accumulate more power, sucking power from the states, and the states tend to suck power from the municipalities, and then the municipalities suck power from the individual and families. So in the end, everything becomes centralized. Um, Decentralization means it puts this thing the other way around. Individuals and families and communities at the municipal level, they are the only layer, I would say, and they don't have anything above as a focal point to follow or that they have to comply with. They just participate in their communities because they want to, and they just follow whatever are the local rules of the local community, and if they don't like them, they go to another community, etc. What I'm describing is mainly systems in computer science. So it's a one-layer system, and there's no higher layers that provide guidance or rules, or and for that they have to provide permission and stuff like that, and they become more centralized and more restrictive, and they leave people out, etc. A decentralized system is a system where you participate and you can go participate and leave, and there's no higher authority that is coordinating the behavior of any of the participants. Um, this was practically impossible. I guess it was impossible between proof of work, but proof of the thing is, systems that are like this, how do everybody achieve consensus about the current state of the system? How do everybody achieve consensus about the single set of rules, etc.? How to produce information, accept new information into the system? Bueno, there had to be a way, because if you do away with a coordinating point that was the central government, or the leading administrative point, you need to replace it with something that creates this consensus. If not, it turns into chaos. That's another thing. Blockchains are strictly rule-based systems. They're not the law of the jungle that anybody can do whatever they want. They are very strict sets of rules. The thing is that we all agree to those rules and achieve consensus based on a signal, which is proof of work. No, somebody at some point in the network creates a block, and that is the signal within the noise. And when everybody receives a copy of the block, they know that that's the correct block and the latest state of the system, based on the information of the proof of work. Because it's very unlikely that anybody else could do that same proof of work. So that's, I don't know, my thought about the difference between centralization and decentralization. So what do these systems achieve? Well, they achieve what I just described. For the first time, I think, in computer science, a global network of machines run by people who speak different languages, belong to different religions, and different cultures, and different nations, regardless of whether those nations are at war or at peace, or where they are geographically. These machines, every 15 seconds in the case of ETC, they agree exactly on the state of the network, with no risk of centralization, and no director or admin or president or king that is telling them which is the correct state. So that solves the problem that Nick Szabo described, that trusted third party tend to abuse their position and tend to abuse our property and agreements and money and stuff like that. So I think that is the blockchain the problem that blockchain solved. They provided a way to be able to coordinate without central focal points.
Right. It's this contrast between top-down authoritarianism order versus bottom-up emergent order and market forces that ultimately, in my belief, are able to come to much higher levels of coordination because they can be dynamic and they can adjust to change, and because they're completely voluntary, they can make decisions in a way that if every individual participates in and benefits from transactions because they're voluntary, overall the system can be much more efficient as opposed to ossified top-down approaches.
Exactly. Top-down approaches, they can capture you if you cannot escape the system. No, so that happens with nations, for example. If you live in Uruguay or the United States or Ukraine or Afghanistan, it's very costly to move from nation to nation. If you don't like what's going on in where we live in Nigeria, for example, it's not that okay, I'm going to switch now, I'm going to click this button, and I'm going to move to another nation. It's very costly. You have all your social, your affections, your business, everything is very difficult to move outside of the communities where you are, etc. In blockchains, that is removed. So now this decentralization is really possible because they cannot capture. You're very difficult to capture in that sense. Also, you mentioned another thing that's very interesting. You mentioned the concept of markets. I think blockchains are perfect for markets. And like I said before, blockchains are very strict protocols with rules, with very strict rules that are enforced with technologies that are practically impossible to break. So markets are the same. Markets are not the law of the jungle. People think free market, because it has a term free, means that it's the law of the jungle and whoever is stronger wins. Markets that can only exist are an abstraction or an invention by humans. They can only exist only when you have very well evolved institutions and rules and law, and those are followed very strictly. For example, to list your company in the New York Stock Exchange, you have to go through a whole protocol to list your shares, and also daily trading have to respect a certain very strict protocol. If not, they kick you out. So markets are also very strong sets of rules, and the stronger the rules are, and this is like paradoxical, the more free participants are, and the more free
Right.
price formation and participation and supply and demand.
It's basically the concept of rule is law. If you know, sorry, the rule of law. If you know what other
Yes.
people are going to be done and are limited by, it means you can act in a more confident way, knowing that they are limited in their actions as well, as long as you're all
Yes.
playing the same game to the same standard, which goes out the
Exactly.
window when you have top-down authorities that can just abuse the law. So you don't have
Yes.
rule of law in the normal system, but with coded law,
Exactly.
you can actually achieve that.
Yes. And the more strict is the law and it is followed, the rule of law, the more freedom is created, especially in decentralized
Yep.
systems.
Yeah, so I think ultimately it's about creating freedom for individuals at the end of the day. That's the ultimate goal of this whole endeavor, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so I know you have to go in a few minutes, so I wanted to open the floor up if anyone wanted to ask some questions from the audience.
Yes, I have 11 minutes.
Hello, Donald.
Hello.
Just one question. because we are having troubled times. How do you see? So, do you have any information? Do you have any knowledge of how blockchain is used in military, in armies? Are smart contracts used for I don't know, robotics or tanks or rockets or airplanes? How does the global armies, I don't know, how does blockchain fit in this less secure world?
I don't know. I don't know if militaries are using the blockchain. I am convinced that a country like Russia, they already own Bitcoin, and it's just a secret. So I would say that an immediate use case for military anywhere. Now we have the current situation of Russia and Ukraine, but now I'm talking in general. Now, I think that just like money needs to be sound and has to flow as freely as possible to foment and enhance the economic process. I guess that supply chains can be enhanced if the military have ETC and Bitcoin and they use smart contracts for the execution. The supply chain would be much more certain, I guess, stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't know anything. Another interesting thing is that the internet was created by the military here in the United States precisely to make communications redundant and to avoid interruptions in communication, even if systems would be attacked or bombed and stuff like that. No, because it's a decentralized system, and Ethereum Classic is designed for that. It's designed to survive a nuclear war because there's nodes that replicate the blockchain and accept transactions all over the world. So if you're in a certain area that has war and you get disconnected, you can reconnect again in a permissionless way without asking anyone, and continue sending transactions and checking the blockchain. And everything is replicated everywhere. So if half the nodes fall because there's a nuclear war, the other half can continue operating even though the others are out. And when the others come online again, they can reconnect very easily, no, because of proof of work.
Okay, thank you.
We have many topics to cover in this whole philosophy. We could go on for hours, and I really hope you can join us again for another installment of this discussion, Donald, in the future, because we could really drill down on some really interesting pathways.
Absolutely, yes. You wrote there on the GitHub page for this call an outline of topics. So I would be very glad to join again some other day in the future to continue talking about those things. I won't do a prepared presentation, and we just can start talking from the beginning.
Awesome, that sounds good. I think there's we're on a kind of frontier, really, and given that there's, well, compared to Ethereum, there's not that many people interested in Ethereum Classic. We're in a very sort of interesting position to be able to explore these ideas and apply them in practice on a chain that actually cares about those ideas. So I think it's really important for us to really delve deep and see where we can go with this.
Yeah, like you wrote, what we do on a daily basis with Ethereum Classic is downstream of philosophy and principles. So the more we talk about principles and we think about them and we process them in our minds, the better.
Absolutely. And I get the sense that in the coming years, whether or not we like it, these principles are going to be becoming very useful, and the chains that don't have anchors to the philosophy are going to soon find that they are lost, and they will succumb to centralization and failure eventually.
Absolutely. I think that there's two themes that the chains that lost their way have. One is scalability at all costs. Scalability. Because Bitcoin is not scalable. Oh, I have a great idea. If I make one that is scalable, I'm going to win. Uh, the other one is innovation. Bitcoin is very slow. Ethereum Classic is they go very slow. They're very conservative, so they don't innovate. So if I'm faster innovating, I'm gonna win. Yeah. All that stupid thinking totally misses the point, and it's exactly because they don't have principles. They don't get it that the whole point is decentralization and trust minimization. If you're going to innovate and scale by sacrificing that, then you're missing the point. You went in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. The whole sort of trade-off of using a blockchain is that you need to sacrifice those things in order to achieve something that is unique to the technology. So
Exactly. Like
yeah,
Nick
go
Szabo
use
wrote,
AWS.
what?
Yeah, I was saying you could use other alternatives to blockchains like AWS or other centralized
Exactly.
solutions
There's
if you want something like.
innovation doesn't exist. And scalability already exists. Innovation doesn't exist if you're going to imitate what the traditional systems do, no? Because many of these blockchains, they introduce treasuries, which is not an innovation, voting, which is not an innovation, governance, and they make it even worse because the voting in a blockchain, the only way to prevent cyber attacks and sock puppet attacks is by doing coin voting. So they're doing versions of voting in democracies that are worse than the traditional ones.
Absolutely. In fact, they're less transparent, right?
Yeah, less transparent. Exactly. Yeah, because you suddenly come here and there's someone with 12 million coins, and so that means it's 12 million votes, and they control everything. Yes, so it's funny. I was going to say something about this thing of innovation. Yes, I wanted to clarify also the fact that Ethereum Classic may go slower is more conservative, or Bitcoin the same, because we prioritize security, decentralization, permissionlessness, social scalability, etc. Does not mean in any way that innovation and scalability doesn't exist. The only difference is that innovation and new features and upgrades are going to be done, and scalability is going to be accomplished only and only if it meets the very strict rules and principles of decentralization. If not, then you have to keep on waiting and trying to invent new things until you can make them modify them and design them in a way that they don't reduce decentralization and security. So innovation is totally welcome and upgrade. That's why we upgrade every now and then, and Bitcoin had an upgrade recently. And so innovation is welcome and also scaling, but as long as it doesn't sacrifice cost minimization and security.
Yep, and most of the innovation can quite easily do that without even touching layer one. You can have various different scaling solutions in layer two, and yeah, innovation on the contract layer is where all the innovation's happening anyway, really. So that's the beauty of having an EVM.
Exactly. Do it outside of the secure environment of the blockchain. The same thing with social issues. Like if there's a hack, okay, go and look for the hacker and get his private key with the police or the FBI or the legal system, and then recover the money, but don't tamper with the blockchain internally. So Istora and Brotherell, thank you very much for inviting me. Now I have to go. But thank you very much for organizing all these calls every Tuesday. I enjoy them very much. I love to participate. And thanks again for inviting me today.
Thank you very much for your contributions, Donald, and it's always good to have you on. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Have a good week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And I will just remind people listening that Donald last week also had a YouTube video, his second in the series, on a series of presentations that he's doing about the history of blockchain. And episode 2 was released on Wednesday. You can find that on the Ethereum Classic website, and links in this video as well. I think he goes into a bit about all the app ecosystem on Ethereum and various different types of smart contracts and stable coins and various different approaches to innovation, which we were just talking about. So I hope you enjoyed this discussion. If anyone wants to bring up some topics, now's the time. We are opening the floor up. On a note of housekeeping, I think we're going to be planning to do these calls also on a live stream on YouTube. So this will hopefully solve a couple of problems. One being that it's less work involved, so we don't have to encode and upload the videos. They're just automatically done for us. And also it will open up maybe some more community questions and participation from the YouTube side of the Ethereum Classic community. I know there's a lot of YouTubers out there, so it'd be interesting to get them involved as well. So we're going to experiment with that this week, and maybe next week this will be in the form of a live stream. So we will keep you posted in the Ethereum Classic Discord if there is movement on that. And yeah, we have a lot of potential content to go into now with all this philosophy stuff. So if you have any ideas for topics that you wanted to discuss in detail, ideally not just SHA-3, although every topic is welcome, but it's nice to get some variety occasionally. So I hope this has been a bit of a welcome change in the typical SHA-3 discussion. So hopefully we can keep it more varied in future. And as we are coming up to the hour, maybe this is a good time to wrap things up unless anyone has anything to add. So final call for any comments or contributions. And on that note, I would like to thank everyone involved for joining us this week. Thank you, Brolau, for helping with the call, and Donald for joining us. And we will see you all next week, same time, same place, for Ethereum Classic Community Call number 17. See you next week. Bye-bye.